Hi, friends. It's time for your weekly Wednesday word. I'm glad that you're tuned in today. I'm glad that we can connect in this way. And aren't you glad to know that we're a day closer and a week closer to finally having this thing behind us and winning at least this first round against the novel coronavirus? I don't know about you, but one of the crazy sides of dealing with this virus is apparently it not only affects the health of people, but it's affecting my clothes. Every bit of clothes I've got in my closet have shrunk by at least 2 inches since this thing started. I have a bad feeling a lot of us are going to be in Celebrate Recovery for Food Addiction when this thing is over with. But anyway, I hope that you're faring well. Hope that that you are feeling well and making the most of these beautiful days that we have outside. As you can see, last week and this week, we've had to shift where we do the broadcast for the Wednesday Word, do it from home. Hopefully this is improving the sound quality for you, so you're getting a glimpse of at least one little corner of my office. Glad to have you connected here. One of the questions that many of you have asked is the obvious one, and that is, when do we think that we're going to all be back together again worshiping on campus at Freedom Church? And of course, nobody's got a crystal ball to know the answer to this clearly. But I'll give you my best guess, and it is nothing more than that. I hope and would love to see us at a place that we could have some modified version of what we're accustomed to, maybe by the end of May or early June. Don't bank on that, but that's what I'm at least hoping for. To give you some sense of some of the things that we're thinking about as far as what that might look like, as the government is trying to do this three-phase plan to move us back toward a more normal life, and understand we're not going to rush to this. Even when the government gives us a green light to take the next steps, we're going to try and do it when we feel like that we are safe to take the next steps. And we've already seen all of us are just going to have to take responsibility for our own health and making safe decisions, because governments are going to move quickly to reopen things. We're already seeing our neighbors next door in Georgia, the governor moving so quickly now to reopen things. So we're going to just try and do what's wise and take this at a pace where we feel like we're going to keep people safe. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, when we do get into sort of that second phase of this three-phase plan, what we'll probably do at Freedom Church is offer 2 services on Sunday morning in order to thin the crowd, and we'll practice social distancing on Sunday mornings. We won't be able to do any children's ministry. It wouldn't be safe to put kids in rooms together. They wouldn't practice social distancing. We'll have every other row blocked off, and we won't use the same rows for the different services. So like if you come to the first service, you can only sit on rows 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Second service, you'd only sit on rows 2, 4, 6, 8. So you won't sit in a seat that somebody's just been in. You'll have space between you, and we'll do things to try and keep us safe, and we'll split the crowd between the 2 services, so we'll have less people in the room, just for that little intermediate window of time as we're getting closer to a normal routine. So hopefully we'll be there in several more weeks, but we know for at least the next 3 or 4 weeks we'll continue on like we are, and that's okay. The church is strong and has weathered much worse things than this in the last 2,000 years, and the church thrives in seasons of difficulty, and it will continue to do so now. Quick update. I always try and let you know where we stand in terms of just the health of our church family, and I'm very glad to report again that we do not have anyone that we're aware of who's been diagnosed with COVID-19 or who is awaiting test results or anything like that. So that's very good. The one health situation that I would ask you to please cover in prayer, I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago that Margaret Wilson, that is Lee and Diane Wilson's daughter, was having some significant issues and having a lot of tests done, and the results of her bone marrow biopsy were very serious. She found out on Friday that she has a rare form of cancer that affects your blood and your plasma and your bone marrow, and so her mom gave me a quick update yesterday saying that Margaret started her treatments on Monday, 2 days ago, and we'll be doing that through the end of July, and we'll then be going up to UAB for a stem cell transplant. But she said, and I quote, to be sure and tell her that she is doing all this by faith in the great I Am, who is going to see her through this, and that she is going on with her life, that she was going out to buy a Jeep yesterday, and Diane's words were, we're going to rock this thing, and we're just going to stand with them as they face that, and I would ask you to cover them in prayer as they move through this challenging season, and God's going to see them through this. I want to also give you a quick update on our friends in other countries. Our extended Freedom family in Nigeria, Guatemala, and Mexico It's been several days since I've talked with Isaiah. The last thing he sent me was on Friday. The video looked really chaotic and disturbing, so please continue to cover them in prayer. The need for food is actually scarier at the moment than the spread of the virus, so please continue to pray for provision for them. I've been in contact with Mary Purvis in Guatemala earlier this week, and she is just having expanded opportunities to share the love of Christ through food distribution as well as other things that she's doing ministry-wise. But pray for Mary and for provision. God's giving tremendous opportunities, but there's a lot on her shoulders right now. And also our friends Bill and Kathy Craver, the work is ongoing in Tizamine. They had to come back to the U.S. when all this got really bad, but the work continues there in Tizamine. So pray for that ongoing work. And I want you to know that because of how you give, ministries like that, Freedom Church continues to be able to support. Maybe not everybody realizes that, but every month we send funds to both local ministries as well as international ministries. So we're sending money every month to Africa, to Guatemala, to Mexico. And speaking of that, I always share a couple of letters or notes that we get during the course of the week. One of these is not so much a personal one, but I just thought it's worth passing on to you. We always get acknowledgement as the church sends funds on to support other ministries locally, and I just thought, in this time when this meets such a need, I'd share just one paragraph from this. Prodigy Pantry is one of the ministries that you support every week when you give to Freedom Church. And so our monthly acknowledgement from Prodigy Pantry says this: thank you so much for your generous donation of $250 to Prodigy Pantry. As you know, it's about hunger at Prodigy Pantry. The COVID-19 pandemic has us following our emergency operations plan for mass emergency food distributions for Baldwin County families in need. On March 24th and 31st, our compassionate volunteers and caring community allowed us to distribute 2,000 family food units. We will continue these large-scale distributions as long as needed. Your support and prayers make this possible. That is an awesome ministry. We've had volunteers many times from the church be able to be a part of that. If you've never been up there, it's worth going and volunteering, even if you just do it once. But they are doing a fantastic job of feeding people. It's why we support that work financially every month. And you have just continued to do a fantastic job of giving faithfully through a difficult season. And I want you to know, as a church, I've heard other pastors who are saying, well, these are all the things we're having to cut as a result of the crisis that we're in. Well, I want you to know one thing we haven't cut at Freedom Church, and that is our support of other ministries and ongoing kingdom work around the globe. Thanks for how you make that happen. Just one other really short note that I wanted to share with you. I always just like to just pass along a word from our own church family. This one is from Cheryl Haruska, who is there every Sunday, sitting right dead center of the center section next to Renee. And Cheryl, just as she was sending in her tithe this week, included this little note that says, "To my church family, to let you know I am doing well and grateful that I can tune in on Sundays. My daughter's taking good care of me, and I feel very safe and secure. Walking 2 times a day, but I miss swimming and yoga. Look forward to fellowship again. Yours, Cheryl." Cheryl, it's good to hear from you. Glad to hear that you're doing well and making good use of the pretty weather that we have now. I'll turn, one more thing before we turn our attention to the Word, and that is I'll just mention to you as well, I just said Prodigy Pantry is feeding a lot of people, but thank you for how you've been giving food and paper products and those kinds of things to help us with the share tables. Last week, there was so much that had been donated that we had to put out 4 of the long white tables at the church, and even then couldn't hold all of the food and supplies that were being shared. We were able to help 20 families last Wednesday. Every week that number grows considerably, and the good news is that we helped that many families. The flip side of that is about 3/4 of what we had was distributed, which is great. That's what we want to happen every week. But that also left us with not nearly enough supplies to take care of everyone that'll show up this afternoon. So please know that from 4:30 to 5 every Wednesday you have an opportunity to bring by donations. If you can bring by stuff today, that would be great. People who want to come and claim whatever they need can come between 5 and 6. There's no paperwork or red tape. It's just plain and simple. If you want to give, come and drop your stuff off. We're careful about the social distancing thing. We'll set it out and organize it. And from 5 to 6, people just come by and claim what they need, and we just help them with that, supply them with bags, and help them find what they need. So it's so cool to see how needs are being met and people's lives are being touched because of your generosity. So thank you for that. And now we turn our attention to the Word. Philippians chapter 2 is where we left off last week. This is one of Paul's letters that he's writing when he is under house arrest. He's been living with a lockdown a lot longer than we have when he writes this letter. He had already been in prison for an extended period of time, and now he's in Rome under house arrest. And in a lot of Paul's letters, he would include something that would be more of a personal word that's not so much just a word of instruction to the church as it is about the specific people there or specific people with him. And the passage that we'll read today, Paul speaks of two people who were really vital to him, and I just want to share those two paragraphs with you. It's Timothy and Epaphroditus that Paul's going to talk to us about, and there are some cool things that we learn and are challenged by in both of their lives. So first, he speaks of Timothy when he says, "I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I know how things go with me, and I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon." We'll pause right there. I love the confidence that you hear in Paul, that he is, even though he's been locked away for years at this point, he hasn't lost hope, he hasn't lost his joy, and he's saying, I'm fixing to send Timothy to you as soon as I can. I'm trusting that I'm fixing to get word on when I can finally leave this house that I'm under house arrest in, and I'm trusting that soon I'm going to be coming to you, but even before then, I'm going to send Timothy to you because I really do rely on him. So I want to share just a little bit about Timothy and just some of the things that we're encouraged by from his life. Timothy was the son and grandson of two women of faith that Paul had encountered during his earlier missionary journeys. He had carried the gospel to city after city, and in one of those cities that he had deposited the gospel and the church had been planted in, when he passed back through on his next missionary journey, the gospel had won the hearts of Timothy's mother and grandmother, and that faith had been shared with Timothy, who was quite a bit younger than Paul. And there was an immediate connection between Paul and Timothy, to the extent that Paul took Timothy with him on the remainder of that journey and on his next missionary journey, and really for the rest of Paul's life and ministry. Timothy was just like a son to him. He was his right-hand man. And I just think it's encouraging to recognize when you look at a character like Timothy that it's easy, especially I think in the modern age of the church in the West, for it to feel like it's easy for life in the church to be sort of a spectator sport that seems to revolve, and we can let it, if we're not careful, revolve around sort of a couple of star personalities. Somebody needs to be a great speaker. Somebody needs to be great, really talented musically and vocally, and we sort of shine the spotlight on them and feel like those are the stars of ministry. And the truth of the matter is that's not how God ever intended for ministry to work. That the gospel and the expansion of the kingdom, it moves along lines of relationships through ordinary people like you and me. And God isn't looking for superstars to go out and change the world. He's looking for some Timothys who are just ordinary folks. I love that we get a glimpse of Timothy's strengths and his weaknesses and things that he struggled with in the letters that Paul wrote directly to Timothy. And Timothy got to play a really key role, even though he was young. You know, when Paul wrote his first letter to Timothy, part of what he challenged him with is he said, Timothy, don't let people look down on you because you're young, but you be an example for the believers in life, in love, in speech, in faith, and in your purity. And Paul leaned on Timothy. When I think about his life and really what made him so valuable, part of it is just Timothy's flexibility. He to me, is the equivalent of, on every great baseball team, there has to be at least one guy who is the utility player. He's not the star starting pitcher. He's not the ace reliever. He's not the power hitter in the 4 spot. He's the guy who can play any position and fill any role. He may not be the star at any of those, but he can get it done wherever you need to put him on the field. And that was Timothy. When Paul took Timothy along he used him in so many different ways. In some instances, he would send him ahead as his advance guy to go ahead and lay the groundwork for the ministry that's going to be happening down the road when Paul and his entourage arrive. Much of the time, Timothy would be right there with Paul doing the work of the ministry. But at times, just like in Berea, when Paul would be run out of town, he'd leave Timothy behind to make sure that the people were established and that they connected in groups and that there were elders who were put in place to lead them. And so just so many different ways that he utilized Timothy. He would send him to go into places like Thessalonica or Berea to go back and find out how are things going and what needs to be done to shore up the faith. He would send Timothy into tough situations like in Corinth to deliver his letter and to help deal with all the different fighting and the factions and problems that they were having there. And when Paul's in prison, it's Timothy who comes and just stays right there to be his hands and feet and take care of whatever needs to be done. And Timothy helped him to co-author the book of Romans, the letter to the Roman church that's just so incredibly rich. And so we just see from Timothy that he was that guy who said, whatever you need, I'll do it. I'll go ahead of you. I'll stay behind you. I'll stay at your side, whatever it is. Timothy was that guy who just said, I just want to serve and make a difference. And there's one other thing about Timothy that stands out in what Paul says here in Philippians 2. He said of Timothy in verse 20, I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare, for everyone looks out for their own interests, but not those of Jesus Christ. Timothy had Jesus' eyes when he looked at the world and when he looked at people. And he cared about people who could offer him nothing in return. Paul said, I want to send Timothy to you, to the friends in Philippi, not because Timothy just had any natural relationship with him. He's not from there. It's not like he spent a great deal of time there, but Paul said, hey, Timothy's burdened for you. He longs to go and be there with you and to support you. And you just see in that this is a guy who has a heart for other people groups, people who ethnically may have been different from him, and yet he was so burdened for them. And when I read what Paul says about Timothy in that regard, I think of so many people who are a part of the Freedom Church family who have those kinds of eyes and those kinds of hearts that are burdened for others and for others who may be from other lands. I think of Eileen Creek and Ann Lemus and of people like Forrest and Butch and Lee and Diane and John and Beth and Carol, and people who, some of those that I just named have been over and over to Guatemala, to Mexico, to the Republic of Georgia, to Africa, or chomping at the bits to go to Africa or Costa Rica. And the list just goes on, but people who've been there and done that, and people who are already signing up and saying, I want to go the next time there's a group going to Guatemala. I want to go and be a part of the group that helps to establish the church in Nigeria. So I love to see that God is multiplying that passion among the Freedom Church family. And then a quick look at another character, Epaphroditus. Paul goes on to say, but I think it necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore I am all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. So then welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help that you yourselves could not give me. Now, that's not like some backhanded slap at or dig at the people of Philippi. He's just acknowledging, obviously, all of you couldn't load up and come to Rome to take care of me, so you sent Epaphroditus as your representative to come and be with me and to help take care of me and make sure that I'm fed. And in that prison system, it wasn't like Paul was going to be taken care of by Rome, and so he had to have people that would help him out and people who really could do the legwork for him of ongoing ministry. And so the people of Philippi had sent Epaphroditus, but Paul said, Yes, you heard right, that he got very, very sick. In fact, it looked like he was going to die, and God spared him. And Paul was saying, I'm so grateful that his life was spared. And he said, selfishly, I'm grateful because it would have been grief on top of grief that you sent him here and to minister to me in prison. And then if he had died doing that, that would have been so unbearable. But he said, God did spare him, and I'm sending him back now to you so that you can see him and be relieved by seeing that he is doing well now. And the thing that I just want you to notice about his life is that Epaphroditus reminds us that there is risk involved in following Christ. And Paul says that he was willing to risk his life to meet needs and to help further the expansion of the kingdom. And as I was reading that this week, I was just thinking, there's really a sobering reminder in this for you and for me. As we continue the work of taking the gospel to the nations, at least for a season and probably for a long season, this is going to become a much riskier thing to do. Epaphroditus got sick doing this. He got sick on a mission trip. He got sick to the point he nearly died. And I was just thinking, for the foreseeable future, travel is going to be a really tricky thing. We're all going to think long and hard before we get on airplanes or cruise ships and take vacations. And yet at a point not too far off in the future, we're going to have to get busy again doing the work of reaching the nations. Now, we won't be just absolutely foolish in how we do this, but let's be honest, there's going to be greater risk involved. This disease isn't fixing to suddenly go away unless God just miraculously takes it away. We're asking for that, but there's the very real possibility that this is going to be a disease that's going to be something that we battle for the next several years. And we can't call a time out on ministry for the next 5 years to see if this thing can be completely eradicated. It's a reminder that following Christ was never an invitation to security. Becoming a Christian was never about you getting to a place that you'd never have to risk anything again. If anything, it involves greater risk. Jesus said, if you're going to come after me, you'd better take up your cross and deny yourself to come follow me. The cross was an instrument of death. It's a picture of saying, I'm willing to lay down my life if that is what it takes to follow Jesus. We don't need to be afraid or intimidated by this or be concerned, well, this may slow the spread of the gospel. You can bet on it that it will be the reverse of that. The stakes are going to be higher, the challenges are going to be greater, and the church will be purified and strengthened as a result of this. And our commitment to the call of Christ to take the gospel to others here at home and to the nations will only be increased as we work through this season. I want you to know today that you are loved and you are valued. I miss seeing you face to face, but I'm so glad that we can at least share through the internet. Look forward to being with you on Sunday. I hope you'll connect with your small groups this week. They'll be going full speed through Zoom. CR will be meeting tomorrow evening, youth ministry this evening. So connect in those ways, and we look forward to hooking up with you through this same connection on Sunday morning. You have a great week, and take care.